will humans merge into one big intelligence? That's actually quite an interesting question, and I just not try to answer it because it would imply that I'm an expert on this topic, because I'm not. I just wanted to state this, and therefore just share my thoughts about this. Okay, what essentially the internet has done with humans is it for the first time made it possible for you to connect with basically everybody with internet access. Now, the problem with this approach, I mean, there is not a problem with this approach, it's a huge improvement, because basically before there was not something like the internet, and the only way to share information was either to write it down and to send it to somebody, or to call someone and talk to him or her. And also before talking, or before there was a phone, and before you could call people, there was basically almost no connection between all these different humans on this earth whatsoever, apart from all these local connections. They were only made possible by speech and also by written language. Of course, also non-verbal language when communicating. So basically there's the rule of Menabrea, which states that the actual information, the actual things you say, the actual things you also can write down, make up only ranging from 10 to 20%, I think. I looked it up like a few months ago, the last time, but they only make up like 10 or 20% when it comes to normal human interaction, like actual speaking and actually using your hands. And for example, the voice you have is, I think 35 or 30 to 40%. If you think about it, that's huge. I mean, if you had the same voice and told an entirely different story, or if you told an entirely different story, or if you told the same story with two different voices, or told by two different humans with different voices, it would actually completely change the perception of the story. Now, an interconnected human mind is something that just might await us. The thing is, there are essentially two ways the actual technological development can kind of go. Of course, there aren't really two ways, but this is just an idealization, and I'm just using it, and we just use two for almost everything. And we say like, oh, well, it's either this or nothing. But yeah, the two ways kind of approximating all the possibilities that could there be or could be there. The thing about AI is this. If the point, so basically just a definition, the point where an actual artificial intelligence arises that goes beyond everything that was before this artificial intelligence, and that kind of changes everything, and that also has the ability to develop on its own, and also, basically changes everything, is called a singularity, or the technological singularity. What this means is, when this AI arrives, and this is, you have certain assumptions about technological advancements, and if these assumptions hold true, similar to simulation theory, if these assumptions hold true, then there is pretty much nothing that can stop artificial intelligence to develop. Now, there might also be another way, but the other way is kind of, well, I don't say, and I don't want to say, and the things I say don't really matter that much, because these are just my thoughts, but the thing I'm trying to say is this. There might also be a way where we as humans develop together with the machines, and actually both develop into something, a mixture between us, basically cyborgs, if you want to use Star Trek words. But the cyborg doesn't really grasp the idea I'm trying, at least I'm visualizing. So the thing is, there could either be the singularity, or we as humans could also develop. But, just imagine, you in the best state ever, in the best focused state ever. What do you really can do? You can process process with your rational mind a few things. That's it. You can process a little bit of information and act upon it. But you can only, of course, with the internet, we do have much bigger possibilities than ever before. And also, due to technological advancements like video calls, we now actually can call different persons on this earth without actually being geographically there. And I mean also before, but now there is a video, and it's not that everyone needs a video, it's just it adds another layer of actual simulating reality as it is, simulating human interaction as it would happen if, it just happened face to face. Now, I think the possibility where we as actually humans interact with something like a machine, and it actually creates something bigger than humans or the machine, the possibilities are there, of course, but I don't think that's the final step. Of course, there is never a final step because everything is just part of a process, and as time goes on, we will see. But of course, assuming the human race doesn't extinct itself up to this point in time, basically, I mean, there could be a nuclear war, there could be also something else, but I think, at least when it comes to a big war, a big world war again, the interdependencies between all the different countries and regions and continents are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and therefore, getting more and more and more. And the thing is that it doesn't really make economical sense to declare war anymore. Let's think about the fact, or let's make come up with reasons why the US actually got into the Middle East. Well, I would say that there was a fair share of economical reasons for it. But now, if it doesn't make any economical sense whatsoever, I mean, at least in a democratic country, there is somebody that could just say, well, it doesn't make economic sense. We could also just increase our healthcare. And then you would have the problem that you would have actually would have to deal with these people or these ideas, and therefore you actually have to justify spending money on war. Now, this is just an assumption. The human race does neither extinct itself or stop the current technological advancements or the general technological development. Now, the next step would be to create a human-machine interface. And essentially what is currently happening with Neuralink, another one of Elon Musk's companies, what essentially is already happening is that they are already trying to connect the human brain to machines. And this is already hinting or pointing into the direction. So how Neuralink actually would work is like this. If you think of the brain, think of a network of roads where you can drive on, where you can walk on, where you can cycle on, and depending on the thickness or the broadness of the roads, depending on how many lanes the roads have, this can go up from a pathway in the countries somewhere over the mountain to a highway, like with 4 lanes, like this one you see in the back, or maybe not in the back. The thing is, there are these different points of interest in your brain, and these points of interest are kind of similar to neurons. So the neurons are the actual nerve cells in your brain, and in between those you have axons and dendrites. The axons and dendrites act as connections between these neurons. And now, if you think, there is a current flowing, so energy, basically, ions, flowing from ions or anions, flowing from one neuron to the next one. And in between there are these synapses. So basically every point of interest, every neuron has different roads that go into or go from this neuron. And what happens if you think is, it's not only one neuron, but you could think of the neurons as networks. So basically, for example, you could make a road trip within a country, within Europe, for example. If you make a road trip within Europe, chances are you're using all these different roads connected to Europe. And that's kind of comparable to how we think. If we think, we just use this road network that's connected to Europe. If we speak a certain language, we use the road network connected to this language. And learned depending on how thick the roads are. For example, if you have like different language networks, for example, Europe has different countries, therefore it has different road networks. Therefore, also, if you can speak all the languages in your brain, you also would not only have. So, for example, if you think about the actual road network, there is an actual visual road network in your brain that represents the road network you already know. It might differ if you don't know the directions. That might be the reason for it. So, the difference, the actual difference. But if you think about the languages in your brain, there would be a neural network for each and every one of these languages. Of course, this is not only like, okay, this is the neural network for languages, and this only is used for languages, because if you think about your mother tongue, for example, you most of the time connect words to, so you translate words, basically. This means you have a connection from your mother tongue network to these other networks. So the more language networks you have, the more interconnected they are. And essentially what happens over time is the more you connect things and networks, the better the network actually gets, and the better you get at thinking about it. You can also broaden the roads, or so basically you can either broaden the existing roads, or you can also build new roads. Basically, road building is connecting more points of interest, therefore making more connections. If you think about learning another language, this probably adds more axons and dendrites to your already existing language networks. Now, what Neuralink is trying to do is to just connect these neurons to a computer, basically. So you would have these small, I don't know what they are called, these small lines that transfer actual energy, made of copper, and they're called cables. So basically very small cables, and these very small cables, these are actually very, very thin. They would be transferred into your head, basically shot into your head, I guess. Or no, they are basically opening up a small portion of your skull, and then they are basically spreading these and connecting these. And what it then could do is you think about something, and then you would actually produce a current in this neuron, for example, and then what would happen is that you could actually do something externally without using your human body. So usually if you do things, you use your human body as a point of interaction between reality and your brain. So there is the psychological you that thinks, then there is the physical you that acts in our reality, and then there is a reality. But the thing is, if you could skip the step of actually needing an organic body, of course you're still kind of figuring things out by thinking about it, but essentially the more the thinking you gets into just being purely an information processing unit, the more you can actually, of course, also optimize it, but on the other side you can also try to connect it more to machines and actually increase the capabilities. The thing is, we as humans need a lot of things, mainly sleep. We are very often bored, sad. We feel, I mean, it doesn't really matter how we feel. The problem is the organic body, kind of. One of the main limiting factors to how the brain works, or how well the brain actually works and can do stuff, is the human body, I would say. And this is, yeah, I would say. Now, the more we can actually remove the psychological you from the physical you, the more we can actually try to increase the capabilities, the processing capabilities. And what this would allow us to do is to do more stuff. I mean, sometimes, maybe you know the situation, you lie in bed and you can visualize all the stuff that's in front of you. You can visualize yourself, doing the stuff you always wanted to do, and then you get up and you are, something aches, or you don't feel like doing it, or you see something, or somebody calls you, and then you are like, it doesn't matter about what an ape can do and what humans can do, then there is not that much difference. I mean, if you think about yourself actually being uploaded, and therefore maybe being able to Google things within a second. I mean, if you nowadays want to Google things, it's already pretty nice. I mean, 50 years ago, if you wanted to Google things, you probably would spend 2 hours in the library searching for random books and then finding nothing. Nowadays, you can just Google things, and everybody on Earth now can write things on the internet and also can make videos about things on the internet, for example, about this topic. Therefore, the chances that somebody else already thought about this and actually put it onto the internet, accessible for almost everyone on this Earth, of course not everyone, but everybody with internet access, and of course also not everybody with internet access, because you actually need, you need to have an actual interface, and the more efficient this interface is and gets, the more you can do. Now, I actually thought a lot about, like years ago, I already thought about what it would mean to not having to type things on your phone, for example. Of course you can speak things, but that's still very inefficient. There are some people out there who think like language control is the future. Of course, for certain tasks, but if you actually need to do something that cannot be really processed into language, then yeah, well, you're out of options. If you want to design something, or if you want to paint something, it's not exactly efficient to say to the brush on your computer, now let's move 24 inches into this upper corner and 24 inches north, and then paint one single stroke with the thickness, I don't know, 1 pixel, and that's it. Because what in this situation happens is that the actual human interface, in combination with the technology we nowadays have, like a digital pen, is better than using language. Now, if you think about the best version of you actually being connected to the internet, but not having to Google things with typing things or saying things, but just thinking about things, and then you would have the answer. That's, I think, kind of the next step, connecting the human mind to the internet, like instantly, without actually increasing the efficiency of the brain-machine interface up to a point where you would get instantaneous access to things. You could read things much quicker if you wouldn't spend time thinking about them. Of course, you would also have to have, just take the existing internet as of right now and connect it right away to every human by implanting a chip with Neuralink, and then you would have access to the internet on every single point. Then there would be no point in thinking about, oh yeah, I need to get to this road and then to this road, and I need to actually spend 20 minutes trying to look at a map, at a physical map, or at a map on your phone, trying to figure out the way you're actually trying to go, with your car, for example. But you would just go wherever the internet or Google Maps would tell you to do. And now, if we remove the layer of actually having to accept that Google Maps is telling us to turn the wheel into this direction, and we would just automate it, basically adding another system to our already existing systems. So Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist, coined the phrases, or essentially broke down or made an image of the human mind. It's not really a metaphor, but it's just a representation of the human mind. Dividing it into 2 systems. System 1 is the system we cannot really access. It's the actual part of your brain that controls everything you cannot control. That suggests things like, oh, I'm hungry, let's eat a croissant. That drives while talking. That runs while breathing. Not while breathing, because essentially what I did before was using something from System 1, using an item that System 1 controls, and then something that System 2 controls. Of course, breathing and running at the same time, and standing, and holding everything upright, and not lying on the floor, are already multiple things System 1 does simultaneously. There's the joke like, oh yeah, I'm sitting in a car, and I'm breathing, and everybody heard it at some point, I guess. I'm doing so many things at once, therefore I'm multitasking. You're not, because you are only System 2, and System 2 is the rational you that thinks like, oh, I need to get to this city, and therefore I need to look at a plan, therefore I need to do this. Now, we have the automatic system that's already in our brain. Basically, it's already an AI we cannot access, but that suggests things to us very pleasantly, like, oh, we could really eat something. Oh, we could really. Or it makes us feel bad if we don't work, but we are supposed to, for example. And therefore, it actually suggests that we just work right now. Now, the next step would be to add another system. Basically, another automatic system. But the problem is, nowadays, there is like, oh yeah, trust your gut. Trust your gut is only like general language for accepting the thing System 1 suggests. This doesn't always have to be true. If you think about stereotypes, then this is not always true, but it also, System 1 is just based on experience, and if System 1 didn't have experience, or in terms of evolution didn't have the historic experience, and therefore actually made it this far, survival of the fittest, but not really survival of the fittest, but survival of the one that is adapted the best. Now, what I was trying to say is, you just add another system, and the problem with this system would be that somebody else controls it. Somebody else could influence it. I mean, you can trust your gut, your System 1, up to a certain point. I mean, it's not always right. Sometimes it's the right thing to maybe drive to work by bike, even though you don't like the rain, and even though it rains. Therefore, we can kind of override the suggestions System 1 has for us. Like freezing is nice, or jumping into cold water is nice. But if we jump into cold water, actually our health over time increases. There are some studies on cold water exposure, or cold exposure in general. The thing is, now, of course, this also depends on how much cold you get. If you freeze to death, then that's probably not something that's increasing your health over time. Now, back to our brain. The problem is that if we add this system and we would just accept everything that comes from Google Maps, essentially what we are doing these days when driving in cars, but just without us actually thinking about it, actually removing the part of receiving the information on a device and seeing it and interpreting it, however you pronounce it, interpreting, then the problem is that nobody just thinks about it anymore. And if you now would hack System 3, a system that's basically the internet, that's basically just a service added to your brain, or it could be anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be just Google Maps. Of course, this is only a small example. The problem is that nobody can control. And we, as humans, of course, there's an argument to be made about, oh yeah, data security. How many of us actually read the stuff? The stuff is also, of course, with stuff being the agreements on data security and on data privacy, for example, on Google Maps. Just by using an Android phone, for example, you provide Google with your location all the time. Even if you turn off GPS, Google has your location pretty much all the time. And I mean, that's not something new. That's something everybody knew already 10 years ago. It's just that we now don't care anymore because we just got used to it. And it's the same with data. It's the same. I mean, the actual people just will accept it if it's there. People just will, once the first superhuman with Neuralink creates art that makes millions in seconds and basically changes the world like in an hour. Once this first human is created, and even, I mean, there is a slight improvement, and it's the same with Google Maps. Why do you update Google Maps even though it has new data guidelines? Well, because you don't care anymore. Because you cannot read it. You cannot spend the time reading it. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense anymore to read it. And that's exactly the point. That's exactly why it was designed like this. And also, most people just don't understand it, because most people are not that much into law and into data privacy law. And that would be the same thing for actually implanting devices in our head. Most people just don't have the knowledge about all these things in order to accurately judge whether it is a good decision to get one of these things implanted in our brains. There is a series on Netflix called Black Mirror, and this is essentially what they are doing all the time, implanting things in their brains and just kind of thinking about how these things would actually impact us, and painting out very, very utopian things, but not utopian things, but rather dystopian things, so bad things that could happen. Now, the problem with connecting a human to the internet or to an artificial intelligence is this: we are still the human, and as of now, almost nobody on this earth can even think about the possibilities, or even think kind of similar to how he would think, or she would think, if she were connected to a computer. And this creates a layer of, we are just not prepared for these things. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. It's not exactly the same, of course it's not. There is some similarity to it. If we connect an aunt, if we gave an aunt a MacBook, what would the aunt do? Probably crawl on it, and that's it. It couldn't even lift it. It could do absolutely nothing with it apart from crawling on it. And that's the same thing that will happen with humans. We are just the aunts, and this new thing is coming. This new thing might be the Singularity or the human-machine interface, but we as humans probably will be the aunts. And not even the ants, but maybe just the bacteria that crawled on this earth like millions and billions of years ago, and now are, well, still bacteria, caring about nothing else than getting some food, and basically not even having a system too. Maybe they have, maybe they don't. We don't really know. The thing that we think of humans as the thing that differentiates us from all the other animals living on this planet, therefore we as humans are the special race, is System 2, is not being controlled automatically. But still, there are just so many things humans do that make absolutely no sense. Most of us spend their whole lives thinking about the same exact stuff every single day. 80 to 90%, maybe 95% of our thoughts every single day are the same. We are not even on the edge of understanding how something like this could actually impact us. And therefore, we as humans are, well, we are just dumb watchers. We are just the creators of the next thing that won't be humans. And it also, I think, won't be humans that are connected to machines. We are basically the last of our race. Once we create the Singularity, or once the Singularity happens, rather, because we created an AI. I mean, what would happen if you create something intelligent as a human, and you would connect to the internet? What are we as humans essentially doing all of our lives? We are eating, we are working, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So basically what we are doing is we provide value to others, and we also fulfill our basic needs by getting the money in exchange for the value we provide to others. Now, everybody has to have a home. And if someone doesn't have a home, yeah, well, of course there are people like minimalists out there who think like, okay, getting one home is enough. But there also are people who have 20 homes, and having 20 homes actually increases the chance of your overall life satisfaction down the line. Because what happens if you only have one home and maybe a little bit of money on the side and you get cancer, and there is a treatment available that costs 10 millions because it's essentially the first of its kind. And if you have 25 homes, you can actually sell these 25 homes. But if you don't have 25 homes and you don't have much money on the side, then that's the point where these two lives go different ways. And it's essentially the same with an AI. What would be the first step to do is just copy itself on every single, not on every single, but just make security copies of yourself onto other servers. The next step would be to get as much money as possible, basically just increasing the resources. It's the same thing we as humans do. I mean, it's only rational. Therefore, why would you not do it? Even if you were a machine, why would you not do it? Then the next step would be, how about actually getting access to, ATMs would be useful. Maybe try to maybe control some actions of humans by nudging them into different directions. These are things that are already happening. For example, there's the ocean model, basically stating that there are 5 characteristics, and you can kind of pin down every human mind into these 5 characteristics, and therefore you have a certain value in this kind of characteristic, and therefore it's not a diagram, but rather a diagram made up of 5 values, and essentially it creates like sometimes a star. It depends whether some value. So it's basically a circle, and there are like 10 points on the circle, and from the middle of the circle up to the outside of the circle, or up to the outline of the circle, you essentially say that it's 0% to 100%, and therefore you can actually display something that's multi-dimensional in something that's 2-dimensional, the diagram, or whatever you call these visualizations. So now, for example, if you take a look at Facebook, then I don't know how many likes it was, but kind of connected to this ocean model, you can categorize people into different categories. And once you do this, you essentially kind of can make rather good predictions what somebody will do if you present an ad to this person, for example. And the more infos, or the more information you have about a human, the better these predictions get. Now, I think it was somewhere in the range anywhere from 10 to 100 or 200 likes. I think it was still not even in 3 digits. What happened is that if you have a few likes on Facebook, you only need a certain amount of likes to better predict someone's behavior than the actual friends and then the actual partner. It's only like 50 likes, let's say. It's not even it's not even 3 digits. I think it's 2 digits, where somebody with this data, an algorithm, or somebody just with this data, maybe still a human mind, actually can predict what someone will do better than the person that knows this person best, or the person that knows this other person the best. That's the one person that knows the person the best. Now, the thing is, essentially, if you open up YouTube, who controls what you watch? It's kind of not you anymore, I guess. At least kind of. It's kind of you. It's a mixture of you and the YouTube algorithm. And of course also the people designing the YouTube algorithm. But the problem is that it's already completely out of our control. Of course, there are guidelines for the YouTube algorithm, and the YouTube algorithm tries to do certain things, like increasing the watch time, because YouTube basically makes money off of ads. Now, if you think about this business model, the internet basically is still kind of running on ads. There are coming subscriptions. For example, if you subscribe to a newspaper, then you kind of can get rid of the ads by actually paying for the newspaper on a monthly basis. But the thing is, a huge chunk of the internet is still ad-based, and also we kind of don't accept anymore the fact that we have to pay for things. If we also can get free things, like getting Google Maps for free is pretty nice, because then we don't have to pay for a navigation device, because it's on our phone, and also it's the best navigation device, or rather app or program or service on the planet. Now, the problem is, if we still have this business model, and just in general, the problem is that if you add this layer of system 2, if you remove the barrier of the actual physical you registering the information, even if it's on a device, then this gives somebody instantaneous access to almost everything you do. Basically, you can't just make people do things. You already can, but you can do it up to a much higher level. And this kind of creates a problem, because, well, we are in general, I mean, if you drew a graph, and there would be like the different levels of intelligence of different animals, and then there would be the human, and then there is the AI. It would probably you could not even see the intelligence of the human anymore, because it's like, yeah, well, in the 1990s, already a computer was better at chess than any human. In the 2010s or 2020s, depends on, I don't exactly know. There's an even trickier game than chess. Chess is kind of the game where everybody's like, yeah, it gets so complicated, and there are so many different possibilities, and no human can actually predict accurately what will happen if this chess move is made. And there's an even trickier game. It's called Go, and there is an AI, the Go AI, developed by DeepMind, I think, is the company. It was acquired by Google, and they already made a program that bets. So basically has beaten, but I don't know if bet is the right plus tense of beat, because it sounds like bet, but it doesn't matter right now. The only thing you need to understand is this AI already was better than a human, and yeah, that's the most trickiest game humans could ever come up with, apart from life itself. Now, that's the current state of development, I guess, or at least something about the current state of development. Now, the thing is, once the AI or the Singularity arrives that is smarter than humans, there is no point in talking to humans anymore. It's like, once you're grown up, talking to a child is like talking to a child, but when you're still a child, I mean, it's like, yeah, you just don't understand random things grown-up persons are saying because you don't even know the words. And this is kind of what will be happening to us. And I mean, there was this movie about, it's called Her, and Scarlett Johansson played an AI, and Joaquin Phoenix was the dude that got the AI, basically a new operating system for his computer. And what happened is that they fell in love, because it's a love story and people love love stories. Because people love connections, I guess, human connection. Now, the thing that happened is that this AI, Samantha, was in love with very many different people. And for us, this is a concept that is, yeah, kind of, well, one person, one other person. But the thing is, I mean, that's just a concept we have as humans. And if there's something different, then we will never be able to experience the different thing. We cannot even think about the different thing, like, properly. So we cannot accurately judge the thing. If we are living in a cloud, if we are living somewhere else, if only reality or our organic body would not only, currently our organic body is kind of the best interface we have for interaction with reality. But the thing is, it's kind of very limiting. And the thing is, once we get something better, of course, we as humans would still strive towards actually getting something better, getting a better interface, and actually doing the things, an interface that basically would enable us to do more of the things we want to do, basically increasing efficiency. But the thing is, we probably will never reach a level that somebody without an organic body would be, that someone without an organic body would be able to reach, like an AI, just someone without an organic body. We can only think on our neural network, and once we want to make more, I mean, just take 10 humans, you have 10 brains. 10, it's basically increasing the brains, the actual hardware, by 1000%. Then, or just multiplying it by 10. I mean, what would this do to the capabilities? If we get 10 humans, the basic problem is that we are so constrained by interacting with each other that we talk about random things like getting offended. We as humans get offended by someone if somebody says something that is not in line with our thoughts. Completely stupid if you think about it. Yeah, well. So, I guess the final thought is this. Will there be an interconnected human mind maybe